So my name is Alexandra. I have been pagan since the day I was born. My entire family is pagan, and my entire family comes from Lebanon and Syria, and they learned about Arabic polytheism and came here to this country for religious freedom, and also for many other reasons as well. But I am based in Colorado and in the U.S. And I love teaching about different forms of paganism. I've been a practicing pagan since I was born, but really for about 25 years now. I started really actually getting interested in practicing when I was probably about 4 years old. And I would go to rituals with my parents and learn about different forms of divination work, such as tarot cards and runes reading and cartomancy and Arabic numerology. And one thing that was extremely interesting to me was that somehow, for some reason, we use the word pagan to talk about every single indigenous practice, every single spirituality that is not Abrahamic, every single religion that is polytheistic, every single religion that is pantheistic. We use the word pagan to describe every single one of those, which I always found to be very interesting because obviously there are millions of different practices that are not Abrahamic and that would fall under polytheistic and pantheistic and even non-Abrahamic monotheistic practices. There are also millions of indigenous practices where pagan isn't part of their language and has nothing to do with their culture and isn't a part of any terminology that they would identify with. So why in the Western world do we use the word pagan to describe every single one of these spiritualities and religions? And today, I'm going to tell you guys why. So paganism was first used in the 4th century. Paganism is a term first used in the 4th century by early Christians for people in the Roman Empire who practiced polytheism or ethnic religions other than Judaism. In the time of the Roman Empire, individuals fell into the pagan class either because they were increasingly rural and provided and well, they were increasingly rural and provincial relative to the Christian population, or because they were not milits Christi or soldiers of Christ. So as you can tell, I did not write that, but I was quoting the Oxford University Press, and so this is as many professors at Oxford have studied the anthropology of the Roman Empire, we have realized that the term pagan started being used for the first time during the Roman Empire in the 4th century. And what it was used for was to identify a certain class of people that were, number one, not Christian and not Jewish, and they didn't fall into any of the Abrahamic religions of the time. Also, they were living in very rural areas, and they were seen as lower class and peasants. And so because they were seen as lower class, because they were seen as peasants, because they didn't live in the developing cities, it was also said that they didn't have education. So they didn't have religious education. So it wasn't necessarily that these people were rebelling against the Christian church. It wasn't necessarily that these people were against Christianity or against Judaism. It was just that they didn't have education and they weren't living in cities. They weren't listening to the people discuss and talk about Christian theology. And so it, in a lot of cases, was more of a lack of education about Abrahamic religion rather than an outward rebellion against the Christian and Jewish religions that were present at the time in the 4th century in the Roman Empire. So I'm going to open it up now to questions. Please feel free to unmute yourself or ask questions in the chat. But does anybody have any questions about everything that I just started talking about? This is going to be a very deep, dense subject. And so please feel free to step in, ask any questions that you have.
I had a question, Alex, and that is when you talk about Abrahamic religions, what exactly is the religion based on Abraham?
So that's actually a great question. So it is considered an Abrahamic religion if it stems from the Torah. So if it is a religion that originated with the Torah, and also in more modern times, Islam would fall under that as well. So things like Judaism, things like Catholicism, things like Christianity, and then all the branches of Christianity, all the branches of Catholicism, as well as religions such as Mormonism, and any religions that are going to hold the same theology as the Torah and the First Testament.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay. So, alternative terms used in Christian texts were Hellene, Gentile, and heathen. Ritual sacrifice was an integral part of ancient Greco-Roman religion and was regarded as an indication of whether a person was pagan or Christian. So there was a time. There was a time when the word pagan was first coined during the 4th century in the Roman Empire, and all these different words were being used to describe pagans. And as we know, pagans are just people who did not identify with the Christian or Jewish religions of the time, and or people who had not been educated on the Christian and Jewish religions of that time. And so it wasn't yet that we saw war happening. It wasn't yet that we saw people being killed for being pagan, being killed for not being Christian or Jewish. And nothing had really started yet where it was not okay to be pagan. It was just kind of seen as lower class, uneducated, not enlightened, not, you don't know of the incredible, amazing God and Jesus Christ and all of these things, and they feel sorry for you. You are just kind of a very poor rural person. And so a lot of the pagan practices were still going on, especially outside of the city. And things like that included animal sacrifice. Also, in this picture that you see that I have here, it is also creating shrines and creating altars and rituals surrounding different goddesses and different gods. And it was not against the law yet to be pagan. So as I stated before, just to reiterate for anybody who showed up just now or very recently, paganism was the term, and the word was first coined during 4th century Roman Empire. And what it meant was any group of people who did not practice or identify with or know anything about the Christian and Jewish religions of the time. And so, yeah. So then they started coming up. Oh, go ahead.
Just a question on a word here.
Yeah.
Helene.
Yes.
Is that meaning Greek?
It is. Yep.
Okay, got it.
Yes. So some other words that started showing up to describe these Greco-Roman spiritualities that were being called pagan or just not Christian and not Jewish were heathen, Gentile, and Hellene. And yes, a lot of these have root words in Latin and Greek. And so people started noticing more and more that there was a class difference. Paganism became a class and a class of people. And it was a much, much, much lower class of people. And it started to become this idea that if you were pagan or you were a heathen, that you were so uneducated that you should not have as many rights as the other people. You were so rural and you didn't understand the way that modern society worked, that you should be very much outcasted from society. And this was a very slow process, and it happened over a long period of time. But very slowly, the two classes, the ones being either Jewish and Christian, or the ones not being Jewish and Christian, and therefore being heathens and being pagans. And pagan turned very quickly into a derogatory term. And of course, heathen was also a derogatory term, as well as Gentile or Hellene.
Hey, Alex, did it have anything else to do with like the different sex of the person, if they were male or female?
Not yet, no. So because it was because the Roman Empire was still slightly, I don't even know exactly how to describe it, but there wasn't necessarily as much blatant sexism during this time period. Now, of course, Christianity is starting to take over. It's just starting to be born. We are going to get to where the sexism happens. Yes. Because, of course, as you start to see Christianity completely take over, become a dominant religion that starts to murder and kill all of the pagans, and then you also start to see sexism and how men need to be in charge, and that women become the second class and pagans just get murdered. So it does get there, but not yet. And I think that one of the reasons, which that's actually a great question too, I think one of the reasons why sexism wasn't like extremely prevalent during this time was also because everybody had been pagan, and Christianity and Judaism were not the dominating culture and dominating religion at the time. And yes, this does include Catholic. I'm answering a question from the chat. So yes, this does include Catholic. When I say that the word pagan means anybody who is not of an Abrahamic religion, an Abrahamic religion, Catholicism would fall under that. But during this time period, during the Roman Empire and in the 4th century, you are not going to see Catholicism as much in this specific part of the world. It is going to be much more Jewish and Christian. But so there is so much. This is a very dense topic. We have to go very slowly. So the reason that you might not have seen such blatant sexism during this period was because since Christianity was not the most prevalent religion and Judaism wasn't the most prevalent religion, so many people were still what they called pagan, but just polytheistic and had completely different and separate belief systems. There were hundreds of different belief systems, hundreds of different spiritualities. All of these spiritualities included goddesses. And because they held goddesses so highly, because they held daimons so highly, which could also be female, there wouldn't have been as much sexism because women would probably have been compared to the deities and goddesses of the time. Whereas then once Christianity takes over, as we know, there are no goddesses and goddesses don't exist anymore, and that's that. So, yeah, but that is just me inferring. I'm not sure of that statement. That just sounds right to me. So The evolution of the term pagan. During and after the Middle Ages, the term pagan was applied to any non-Christian religion. And the term presumed a belief in false gods. So now we are starting to get to the point so first it was just considered a different class of people, just people who didn't live in the city, people who are uneducated, and people who hadn't discovered or learned about the Christian God yet. Now it starts to become this idea that you are choosing. You are choosing not to be Christian. You are choosing to hold on to your ancient belief system and you're not keeping up with this modern Christianity and Judaism. And also, not only that, you are choosing to not believe in the one true God. And you are choosing not to believe in Jesus Christ. And you are choosing not to follow the Bible. You are choosing not to attend church and to follow the cultural norms of Christianity. Instead, you are choosing to sacrifice animals and do these rituals that we don't understand, and you are choosing to continue to practice all these different spiritualities that are slowly starting to fade away. But anyway, at this point, it becomes a choice, and a more noticed choice. That instead of saying, oh, they must just be uneducated, people would start saying, oh, they are choosing to defy God. They are choosing to denounce God. The origin of the application of the term pagan to polytheism is debated. So as I said before, yes, pagan means anybody who is polytheistic, but it just means anybody who is not practicing an Abrahamic religion, which would mean any of the branches under Judaism, any of the branches under Christianity, any of the branches under Islam, and any of the branches under Catholicism. So that's everyone. Not every single religion outside of those ones that I just named is going to be polytheistic. Some of them are atheistic. Some of them just don't believe in a deity. Some of them are pantheistic, meaning that they believe in a whole bunch of different things that may or may not be deities, that may or may not have created absolutely anything. They may not give a crap about the human race, but there's just things that they believe in that are not human or an animal. Such as believing in jinn or fae or daimons or the elves and the gnomes, and having that be your only belief system and not believing in gods or goddesses. And so the reason it's debated is because not every religion that falls outside of an Abrahamic religion is going to be polytheistic. So not all pagans are polytheistic, but all polytheists are pagan. Oh, atheism. Great question. So atheism is when you do not believe in a deity at all. No deity. No gods, no goddesses. So, in the 19th century, paganism was adopted as a self-descriptor by members of various artistic groups inspired by the ancient world. In the 20th century, it came to be applied as a self-descriptor by practitioners of modern paganism, neo-paganism movements, and polytheistic reconstructionism. Modern pagan traditions often incorporate beliefs or practices such as nature worship that are different from those of the largest world religions. So we are going to go back to continue our story about the Roman Empire and how paganism went from just being people who lived in rural areas and didn't know about Christianity yet, to where, as we all know, or I don't know if you do know this, but it graduated to being everybody got murdered for being pagan. And Christianity and Judaism were the only religions that were allowed. But it's a long road to get there, and it goes back and forth. But we have here the evolution of paganism. And so we know that after a lot of genocide occurred, that once the 19th century hit, paganism makes a reoccurrence, and it makes a resurgence, and people start reconstructing these religions and going back to these ancient religions. And Kim raised her hand. Yes, what's up? Did you have a question, Kim? So before we actually cover contemporary paganism, we are going to go back to the Roman Empire. So once I had just said that now it had become a choice, people were choosing not to be Christian, people were choosing not to be Jewish, people were choosing to continue with the spiritualities that they've had for generation upon generations, and that they didn't want to be converted to a new religion. But people did not identify with the term pagan, obviously, because it was given to them by the Christian church, and it was given to them by the Christians, and they did not identify with this word, and they did not like this word. And I really like the quotes from these authors describing this point that we all have to remember. So even though paganism has become a term that we use in the Western world to describe the type of spirituality that we practice, it did not start out as a term that was chosen by the people who were considered pagan, and they did not like the word. It was a derogatory term to put people down, and also about 10 to 15 years later to kill them all. So, or to kill hundreds of thousands of them.
Hey, Alex, then why do you think that we still use that word then if it was considered a part of a derogatory term? I mean, that could be saying that way now to us as some different religions believe that way still.
Yes. So as with many terms, after genocide, after war, and after a lot of horrible, terrible history, a lot of cultures, a lot of societies, and a lot of groups of people usually choose to take these derogatory words back and to turn them into a word that is no longer derogatory, and that instead is only to be used by the people who are pagan, and is a word of endearment, and it is a word to describe the type of practice that we have. But you're right, there is some controversy there. Should we be using a word that was created by Christians to not only put them down, but to kill them, and to kill people who practiced ancient indigenous spirituality? And we're actually going to debate that in this class. So yes, great question. We're getting there. So the quotes that I really liked from these two authors were,
Okay, there we are.
one, it is crucial to stress right from the start that until the 20th century, people did not call themselves pagans to describe the religion they practiced. The notion of paganism, hold on. The notion of paganism, as it is generally understood today, was created by the early Christian church. It was a label that Christians applied to others. One of the antitheses that were central to the process of Christian self-definition. As such, throughout history, it was generally used in a derogatory sense. And then we have the other quote by Peter Brown. The adoption of paganists by the Latin Christians. So paganus is pagan in Latin. By the Latin Christians as an all-embracing pejorative term for polytheists, represents an unforeseen and singularly long-lasting victory within a religious group of a word of Latin slang, originally devoid of religious meaning. So what that means, that I just said there, is that using this word, the word that the Christian church created to describe every single polytheistic, atheistic, pantheistic, and indigenous practice throughout all of that section of Europe, them doing that was basically one of the strategies that they used to be able to practice religious colonization. They were able to cause mass genocide against the pagans. And one of the ways that they did that was by having a singular term to describe hundreds of cultures. Now you do not need to know the name of their culture. You don't need to understand their culture. Nobody does. Nobody needs to understand their culture. Nobody needs to understand their religion. Nobody needs to like make a moral decision on whether or not their practice is evil or not evil. Nobody has to learn anything about any of the indigenous people or the indigenous religions, because you call it pagan, and now that means bad. And so now you can kill them without having to learn anything about them or even have to prove that their religion is bad or evil in the eyes of God. So
I had a question, Alex.
yes.
On the left side, it says here that the stress did not start until 20th century for the word pagan, and yet it talks about it being a description of a pagan before that. So I'm a little confused. Like, did the people before the 20th century did not call themselves a pagan, yet they were pagan, and throughout history from the first century, they were actually pagans. So it's a little confusing.
So what it says is, yeah, it is crucial to stress right from the start that until the 20th century, people did not call themselves pagan to describe the religion they practiced. So in the 4th century, paganism was developed by the Christians to call anyone who wasn't Christian this name. It wasn't until the 20th century that pagans started calling themselves pagans. Does that make sense?
That clears it up better for me. Thank you.
Awesome, of course. So, yes, the evolution occurred only in the Latin West and in connection with the Latin Church. Elsewhere, Hellene or Gentile remained the word for pagan. And paganos continued as purely a secular term with overtones of the inferior and the commonplace. So we talked about that already. Whereas, in the 4th century, pagan did not necessarily mean against the Christian church or rebelling against the Christian church or not believing in God. All it meant that you were common and you were poor and you were uneducated. And so the word paganos or pagan didn't start to become a term that they even used as somebody who was not Christian or anti-Christian until much later. Well, until probably around the middle of the 4th century and the 5th century. So, yes. But like I said, what they did in creating this one word that describes every single person on the planet Earth who is not Christian, Catholic, Jewish, or Islam, it made it so much easier for them to colonize the world by doing that, because you no longer have to worry about any sort of morality when it comes to judging these religions on whether or not God would have been against them, because that's what they said, right? They said that they destroyed and murdered all of these people in the name of Christianity because God wanted them to. So they never had to learn about the other culture's religion to decide if God would have actually been against it, because they just called it pagan, and pagan meant against Christianity, against God, and therefore you can murder them now. So in creating this term, they also made it easier to colonize. So using the word pagan to gain power, like we were just talking about. So Paganists acquired its religious connotations by the mid-4th century, like I just said. So before that, it just meant you were poor, common, peasant, uneducated. And then towards the mid-4th century, it started having religious connotations. As early as the 5th century, paganos was metaphorically used to denote persons outside of the bounds of the Christian community. So as we talked about, now it is being used as a word to describe somebody who is choosing to be outside of the Christian or Jewish communities. Following the sack of Rome by the Visigoths, just over 15 years after the Christian persecution of paganism, under Theodosius I, murmurs began to spread that the old gods, the pagan gods, had taken greater care of the city than the Christian God. In response, Augustine of Hippo wrote De Civitate di contra Paganos, or The City of God Against the Pagans. With his writings, he stated that all Christians were ultimately citizens, hence the foreign invaders, or not of this city, or rural, which were the pagans. So, this is when it started. It started with this lovely dude who is like considered a saint now in Catholicism, but whatever. So this dude, Augustine of Hippo, whose name then changed to Saint Augustine, wrote a book. And now instead of just having these pagan indigenous people who exist amongst you, who have always lived there, now only Christians are citizens, and pagans are no longer citizens. And that is when, so towards early in the 5th century, that is when it started to turn to genocide. You either convert and become a citizen, or you are not a citizen of this country. And therefore, we can do all kinds of stuff to you, whether that be murder, whether that be imprisonment, or whether that just be deportation, which obviously we would call it deportation now. I'm sure that wasn't the word for it back then, but you know, kicking you out of the country. So this is when it began with this asshole. So Augustine of Hippo, Aurelius Augustinus Hipponensis, born November 13th, 354, and died August 28th, 430. Also known as Saint Augustine, was a theologian, and philosopher of Berber origin, and the bishop of Hippo Regius in Numidia, Roman North Africa. So he had come from Rome, but because Rome colonized parts of northern Africa, he was a bishop in Roman North Africa. His writings influenced the development of Western philosophy and Western Christianity, and he is viewed as one of the most important church fathers of the Latin Church in the patristic period. His many important works include The City of God, which we just talked about, On Christian Doctrine and Confession. So this is the book that I used, the article really is what I use, but it's an article from a book from Harvard. So you can go look up this article from Harvard talking about how Augustine was really the very first person that started this big, huge, worldwide genocide against pagans. But it started in Rome, in the Roman Empire. And it also started in the Visigoth Empire as well, because they had taken over and defeated the Roman Empire. So that was the big deal. So when you kind of understand history as well, something that I really like to look at is that this huge, gigantic genocide, this genocide that a lot of pagans will talk about still today, where in the name of Christianity and in the name of God, hundreds and thousands of indigenous people were taken from their homes, kicked out of their country, and murdered. Because if you weren't Christian, you weren't considered a citizen. And so how citizenship is a much bigger deal than a lot of times we like to say it is in modern time. But just, I like to look at history. It's important to not repeat history, at least history that we don't want to have repeated.
Hey, Alex, where were they deported to, I guess you could say?
It depends. Usually probably different parts of Greece, and probably Africa. I could see that because of the colonization going on there. So, or probably I could see them being thrown to the Middle East as well, because over there everybody was still pagan at this time. Islam had not even been created yet. Muhammad had not existed yet, so it was strictly and only pagan. So yeah, but I am not actually completely sure. That's a great question. I should look that up. So the definition of paganism. What was the original definition of paganism, and why was the term used? So I loved this quote by J.A. North. It is perhaps misleading to even say that there was such a religion as paganism at the beginning of the Common Era. It might be less confusing to say that the pagans, before their competition with Christianity, had no religion at all in the sense in which that word is normally used today. They had no tradition of discourse about ritual or religious matters, apart from philosophical debate or antiquarian treaties. No organized system of belief to which they were asked to commit themselves. No authority structure peculiar to the religious area. Above all, no commitment to a particular group of people or set of ideas other than their family and political context. If this is the right view of pagan life, it follows that we should look on paganism quite simply as a religion invented in the course of the 2nd to 3rd centuries AD, in competition and interaction with Christians, Jews, and others. So the only reason that the word pagan even exists to describe a religion or a spirituality is solely and only because it opposed Christianity. These people did not have a name for their religion. They had no dogma. They had no people in charge. They had no book and theology that they had to abide by, or else they were wrong and bad and evil. They had no place that you were going, if you didn't follow the exact doctrine that some human being told you that you had to follow. And there was no structure of structured, organized religion. the only reason that the term pagan was coined as a term to describe a religion in quotations was because Christians needed a way to decipher who was Christian and Jewish and who wasn't. And that's it. That's the definition of paganism, that you aren't Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Catholic, Mormon, or any of the branches in between. And you should reread this quote. Let that sink in, because it's a very good quote. And when you think about it, it's really sad. Not this one, sorry. This is a new page. You should reread, oh my gosh, this quote, because it's very sad. And it makes you think a lot. So defining paganism is complex and problematic. Understanding the context of its Understanding the context of its associated terminology is important. Early Christians referred to the diverse array of cults around them as a singular group for reasons of convenience and rhetoric. While paganism generally implies polytheism, the primary distinction between classical pagans and Christians was not one of monotheism versus polytheism, as not all pagans were strictly polytheistic, as we talked about. Some were atheistic and so on. Throughout history, many of them believed in a supreme deity. However, most of those pagans believed in a class of subordinate gods / daimons. To Christians, the most important distinction, whether or not someone worshipped the one true God. So it didn't matter if you were monotheistic. It didn't matter if you were like, hey, man, I know I don't believe in your God, but I have my own God, and he is a monotheistic God, so he created the entire earth and no other gods can oppose him. So is that okay? And the answer was no. You had to believe in the one true God, which was the Christian God / the Jewish God, because back then the two gods were one and the same. Of course, much, much later in history, we see Judaism get persecuted as well. This was not that time. So if your God was not the Jewish God and the Christian God, then that's it. You were pagan. And that meant you were probably going to be executed or converted or deported or imprisoned. Those who did not believe in the one true God, polytheist, monotheist, or atheist, were outsiders to the church and thus considered pagan. Referring to paganism as this one is really important too. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the last panel, there was a term daimon, or someone close to that. Is that a different kind of spelling for Daemon?
Yes. Oh, it's so cool that you knew that. Yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Of
And
course.
demons as well.
It's not yet. Now, if you would talk to a modern day heathen, a modern day practitioner of somebody who believes in daimons, they would definitely compare them to the theology and mythology of demons. But back then, it was definitely a completely different theology. It stems from ancient Greek and Celtic and Italian indigenous spiritual practices. And back then, to compare it to the Christian demon would be more of a way to be derogatory and to get pagans murdered. So, yeah, not yet. It would not compare to demons in the Christian way yet. And it actually predates Christianity. The daemons predate Christianity quite a bit. So they existed long before the Christian term demon.
Which is the more, I guess, original way to spell it, with the I or the E?
So actually, that's a great question too. The more North African, Middle Eastern, like Mesopotamian way to spell it is with the E. The more European way to spell it is going to be with the I.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Mm. Oh, cool, the Japanese yokai. Yeah, yes. I actually think, even though, of course, these two groups of people would, at this point, not have spoken to each other at all, most people probably wouldn't have known of each other's existence unless you, like, worked on a trade ship, possibly going to the Middle East. But, yes, I would definitely think they are much more comparable to Japanese yokai than they would be to Christian demons. Yeah, for sure. Yes, so referring to paganism as a pre-Christian indigenous religion is equally problematic. So remember that. Referring to paganism as a pre-Christian indigenous religion is equally problematic. So even though in the time period we were talking about, in the country that we were talking about, in the empire we were just talking about, so during the 4th century and the 5th century in the Roman Empire, yes, most of the pagans then were indigenous to that land. And they were the indigenous population, and it was the indigenous spirituality. Yes. But remember, as time went on, paganism started to become this word that we used for any spirituality or religion that did not fall under the Abrahamic religions of the time. So not all historical pagan traditions were pre-Christian or indigenous to their places of worship. So you cannot just say that, you know, when describing what the word paganism means to your friends or family, who of course I'm sure ask when you say I'm pagan, and they're like, what does that mean? Remember to not describe it as necessarily indigenous practices or pre-Christian practices. There are plenty of pagan spiritualities that popped up after Christianity and that were not indigenous to the area that they practiced in. Owing to the history of nomenclature, paganism traditionally encompasses the collective pre- and non-Christian cultures in and around the classical world. So when I say that, just like I had mentioned, in the place of its origin, in the Roman Empire, in the 4th and 5th century, it would make sense to say that the word paganism means pre- and non-Christian cultures. That would make sense in that area. In and around the classical world, including those of the Greco-Roman, Celtic, Germanic, Slavic tribes. However, modern folklorists and contemporary pagans, in particular, have extended the original 4 millennia scope by early Christians to include similar religious traditions stretching far into prehistory. So when the term was coined, the Christian church, at least at that time in the 4th century, wasn't necessarily trying to, you know, talk about the Japanese or talk about the Arabic people or talk about people in Africa or the indigenous North Americans that, you know, they didn't even know existed. But as time went on, paganism started to become a term that we use for all of them, for everyone, for every single spirituality on earth that is not Abrahamic. So there are problems with that. We're going to talk about those problems. It's very problematic that we do that for many different reasons, but also because because of this happening, because of colonialism and religious colonialism, it's really difficult now to go back and give millions and millions and millions of spiritual traditions a name, especially when the people of that language, of that culture, and of that spirituality don't exist anymore to give themselves a name. So very sad things happen due to colonialism. That is one of them. So, ethnocentrism within the terminology and study of paganism. Recently, the ethnocentric and moral absolutist origins of the common usage of the term pagan have been proposed, with scholar Davis Petz noting how, with a particular reference to Christianity, local religions are defined in opposition to the privileged world religions. So, what that means is that anthropologists and scholars who are studying the problematic nature and the ethnocentrism within the terminology of paganism, we are noticing that the word pagan doesn't actually mean anything. The word pagan just means in opposition to Christianity, in opposition to Judaism, in opposition to Islam. Because as time goes on, as history goes on, then we're going to have Muhammad in the Middle East. And Muhammad in the Middle East is going to convert everybody to Islam. And everybody who does not convert to Islam is going to be called pagan, because on those trade ships while Europe was trading with the Middle East, the term pagan became the terminology that even Arabs use, even though it's not even a word in Arabic. And so the people of the Middle East are then going to be called pagan if they oppose Islam. The people of Africa are going to be called pagan if they oppose Christianity and Catholicism. So pagan isn't even a word. It is just a word that means you oppose the colonizing religion. Well, that you oppose the Abrahamic colonizing religion. So, yeah. They become everything that world religions are not, rather than being explored as a subject in their own right. So now when we study pagan cultures, instead of studying the actual culture itself, we study how it's different from Catholicism, how it's different from Judaism, how it's different from Christianity, instead of studying it as a single entity all on its own. So, in addition, Petz notes how various spiritual, religious, and metaphysical ideas branded as pagan from diverse cultures were studied in opposition to Abrahamism. In early anthropology, a binary he links to ethnocentrism and colonialism. So basically anything, any spiritual or metaphysical painting, which I actually have one here for you in this picture, where we have a beautiful Egyptian symbol. When you have these Egyptian symbols that we find on pyramids, on tombs, when we find incredible temples dedicated to the jinn in the Middle East, when we find these beautiful temples in Africa, when we find these amazing structures throughout East Asia, it's studied as an opposition to Abrahamism. So any of those Abrahamic religions, and it's studied in comparison to those religions. So now when we study ancient Egyptian spirituality, we're saying, oh, Anubis is kind of like so and such in the Bible. And let's compare these daimons to demons in the Christian Bible. Or let's say, in Yoruba, which is a traditional African spirituality, let's say, oh, well, the this tradition that they have is very similar to the birth of Christ. These ancient pagan holidays are very similar to the celebration of the birth of Christ and the resurrection of Christ and all of these things. So now, instead of studying them for what they are, we compare them to the Bible. We compare them to the Torah and the Quran and the colonizing privileged religions of the time because, you know, well, because of colonialism and ethnocentrism, but also because we know that those cultures were colonized by these huge religions. And so we always start there. And yeah, so that's super messed up. Using paganism as an umbrella term, but also using the correct terminology for ancient spiritualities is very important. So we're going to talk about why using paganism as an umbrella term isn't necessarily great, but it's all we can do now. Using it as an umbrella term that just means non-Abrahamic, non-Christian, non-Jewish, non-Muslim, non-Catholic is kind of all we can do now. Because like I said, a lot of these cultures, a lot of these spiritualities, a lot of these indigenous practices are not around and alive anymore to name themselves. So, but here are some wonderful names for the European, the traditions that existed in the Roman Empire and in the surrounding areas of the Roman Empire during the 4th century when people decided to just call them all pagans. You can use these words instead. These words, though, of course, we still are going to have problems because what is the colonizing language? The colonizing language became Greek and English and Spanish and French. And instead of getting a lot of these indigenous languages that would have existed beforehand, so of course these terms are still going to be in the colonizing language. But, it's better than just calling them all pagan. But pagan is also necessary. So we do have a lot more to go over, but I want to slow down a little bit now. Now that I got all of that out of the way, here are my references so you guys can see. I want to start having a conversation. Now that you know where it came from, we can go back through the slides, back over the slides, talk about the history. What do you think of the term pagan? Did you know everything that I just said already? What did you think paganism meant? And do you think we should still be using it today? And if not, what would we use?
Well, I think it's probably really, it's so set in the worldview that I think if we tried to use something else, it wouldn't work. I mean, it would be hard to make it something noticed worldwide. But no, I did not know all this stuff that you were saying.
Yep, I agree. Here, I have to grab my cell phone or my laptop charger because it's going to die. But you guys keep talking. I will be 2 seconds.
My idea of paganism is not Catholic or not Christian before I read these slides.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like, I have a variety of belief systems that I practice in myself. So I just consider myself an eclectic pagan. But I feel like it's more of reclaiming the word because I'm also a redhead. So same thing goes along with the term ginger, stuff like that. It was originally derogatory, but if you reclaim it and reuse it, to fit your purpose or your pride in being whatever you are, then it shouldn't matter. That goes back to it being every person's individual preference.
I've been a Christian since I was 16, and this is going back 50 years ago now. I'm also consider myself still Christian, but I do practices of witchcraft, so I'm considered a Christian witch.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always had that atonement that I just never, like, I've always been interested in all these different religions and have respect for them. And I could just never wrap my head around how only one God, you can believe in only one God and do not put any other gods above me. That doesn't seem like something I trust as far as my divine being.
Hi, I'm back. I was listening to what you guys were saying though while I was plugging my thing in. I love having conversations like this.
Hey, Alex, is all this on the website?
It is. I just had Amy start putting it on there, or Tonya start putting it on there. So it should be on there by the end of tonight. Yep.
Okay.
Are you talking about the replay?
Oh, the recording is going to be on the YouTube. That'll be a little bit, but no, these slideshows. This slideshow will be on the website tonight.
Thank you.
Of course. Oh, cool. Kristen, I'm glad that you.
I've got a question for you, Alexandra,
Yes.
and that is, I'm still trying to wrap my head around my academic progress. Is this course tonight going to be automatically put into my academic progress chart?
Yes, you do have to go into your mentorship group and say, hey, I took this class, but yep, you don't have to write an essay. You don't have to do anything. As soon as you tell your student mentor, then it'll instantly be put onto your page. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. So, knew a bit about the history, but this has been very informative and I learned quite a few things. Awesome. We are definitely not even close to done. But I am so glad that so far you have learned so much. This is a very heavy topic. I know I went very fast though, so I wanted to slow down and make sure that we got a time to talk about it, go over it.
I think the word paganism is always going to have that stereotype, just like every other, nationality, religion, sex, everything that we have in the world going on now is going to have that stigma that, oh, you're going to hell because you're a pagan. And no matter what you do, even if you try to change it or even try to come up with an idea of how we can, I don't want to say departmentalize it, but if we try to change the thought process of so many people nowadays, I don't think it would work. I think that we've just become a society that has gravitated towards, oh, you don't believe in Christianity, or you don't believe in Catholicism, you don't believe in an actual true God, then you're automatically considered a pagan.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think that that's very, very true. And I think that too, a lot of this is the same thing with everything. So, for example, the continent Africa. The continent Africa did not choose the name Africa, but that's what we call it. That's what, if you tried to call it something different, your teacher would tell you that you were wrong. Even if you tried to call it a name that people in Africa or people in Uganda or people in Ethiopia call it in their own language, you would still be wrong because its name is Africa. And same thing goes for things all over the world. Colonizers get to pick the names. The colonizers get to pick the language. In Mexico and South America and Central America, they didn't speak Spanish. That is not the native language of those countries in any way, shape, or form. They were Mayan and Incan and all different forms of indigenous cultures. And the only reason they speak Spanish is because of Spain. And so
because they went and pillaged and raped and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, they say that the people who write the history that we know are always the ones who consider themselves the winners.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. And so when it comes to the religion that many people in this class practice, the spirituality that many of the people in this class practice, the winners were Christian. The winners were Catholic, the winners were Jewish, the winners were Muslim. Now, history went on, and they weren't able to kill them all. So we are about to go in and move into modern day. And a lot of these religions came back. And so it's kind of subjective on who the winner was, because these religions are coming back. And now, are they going to be the same? No, they're not going to be the same spirituality that was practiced in a tiny city in the middle of Greece during the 4th century. No, they are not. But they are going to have a lot of the same values, a lot of the same ideas, a lot of the same mythology, a lot of the same theology. And I think that bringing back and taking back the word pagan, using it as a word to be celebrated, not a word that is derogatory, and bringing back these theologies and mythologies and studying them and respecting them and bringing them back to life and showing true respect to the people who founded these spiritualities, founded these philosophies. And I think that's a really beautiful thing that a lot of pagans across the entire world are doing. I think that's pretty cool.
Honoring those who walked before us.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So Alex, let me ask you this. So growing up in a church, I mean, obviously I grew up in Southern Baptist churches, so it's a little different in the mindset sometimes. They actually considered Catholicism, Buddhism, Muslims, you name it. If they were not a God, hey, I'm worshiping Jesus Christ himself, they were considered a pagan. But in some Christianity religions, they actually consider Catholicism a pagan because they have multiple saints that they worship. Is that the way it's being described?
So that's a fantastic point. Number one, Buddhism is pagan, by the way. Buddhism always has been. It is not Abrahamic, therefore it's pagan. Now, Catholicism is a great one to bring up because, yes, there's probably, I know of at least 10, so there's probably more, wars that were fought over the fact that Catholics don't do it right and that they're pagans and that they are tainted by these evil pagans because they have saints and because they do rituals and they eat the body of Jesus and like they drink his blood. And so yes, in some points in time, the Catholics were murdering all the pagans and they were the colonizers. And in some points of time, everybody was murdering the Catholics and they were considered the pagans. So it's a very interesting point to bring up. I love that. Yes, very true.
I grew up in an Episcopalian household, and that's a Catholicism branch. And I was told by a few of my Christian friends that we were not of the same, like not necessarily the same, but we weren't the same kind of people, even though a few of our beliefs were similar, because we ate the body of Christ and drank his blood. We were not, mainstream. We were considered pagan in nature. And I have literally lost friends over that growing up because it was just intense.
I bet. And it's so interesting to think about that too, how in some parts of the world, Catholicism was telling everybody else that they were pagan. And in other parts of the world, Catholics and branches, just like you said, branches of Catholicism were being told that they were evil and pagan. And so pagan, it's even easier to tell that this word doesn't mean anything, that this word is just this word that Christians used to tell everybody else that they were wrong. Well, Christians and Jews, to tell everybody that they are wrong. But I remember when we say that, there's a difference, just so everybody knows, between the religion, Judaism, and the culture of people, the ethnicity, Jew and Judaism, or Jewish. Sorry. So there is the Jewish ethnicity, which is an ethnic background of people who have been horribly persecuted and enslaved and all kinds of things, and who also have a very rich, beautiful, incredible ancient history that are amazing. And then there is the religion. A lot of ethnic Jews also follow the religion of Judaism, but Judaism and the ethnicity Jewish are not the same thing. And not all people who are ethnically Jewish, who come from the indigenous Jewish background and ethnicity, follow the Jewish religion. They are two separate entities. Yeah.
Is that where you get the Hasidic Jews and the other, and then the Jewish?
Yeah, so there are branches, just like people were mentioning and talking about with Catholicism and with Christianity, and we have, Episcopalian, and I don't know, all the different branches of Christianity that there are also branches of Judaism. And so you get Hasidic Jews, Orthodox Jews, you also have, so there are different branches of the religion. In the ethnicity, you have Ashkenazi Jews, and then there's one more. Ashkenazi Jew is the one that is, so those are going to be like the Polish Jews and the ones who originated in the Middle East. And then there's another an ethnicity that is another branch off of the Jewish ethnicity. I completely forgot what it was called now. But yeah, those two things are completely different. Like, for some strange reason, we gave them both the same name, which has confused everybody. But the ethnicity Jew, it's not the religion. It's not the religion. And so when we talk about like the Jews being persecuted, we are not talking about the religion, Judaism, being persecuted. That has happened too. But
it's the religion and the culture.
Yeah, the ethnicity is completely separate and different. You can't like convert to Judaism and suddenly have Jewish features. There are Jewish features that people have. There are Jewish, it's DNA. It's an ethnicity, and so those aren't the same thing. Bree, yeah, yep. It's been very ingrained in the world to have a very distinct association with the word pagan. Yep, exactly. It is homosexuality, like homophobia, racism, misogyny. Yep. So now, over time, and we are going to go back to that slide that I skipped.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, please.
Sorry.
Okay.
So since I can't say that word, since Catholicism has many saints that are also worship, could that be considered polytheistic?
Great question. No. So the reason for that being is that even in Catholicism, so monotheistic is going to mean that there is one singular God that created the universe and that created people and created you and created all things and everything that we know that exists. Only one singular God did that, and only one singular God has a hand in how that everything that was created continues to manifest over time.
That's based on the New and the Old Testaments.
Monotheistic can actually have nothing to do with there are pagan monotheistic religions where you just believe in one Holy Spirit, one God that created all things, the universe, all people, all animals, and that continues to be the only one that can influence them every day. But it's not the Christian God. Therefore, it's pagan monotheism. But Catholicism still believes that, yeah, only one God created the universe and the entire world and all the things that exist, and only one God continues to affect those things today. But they include saints, which they do fall into a different monotheistic category, to where Christians are going to get mad at them because of the saints thing and the ritual thing, but they are still a segment of monotheism.
So in the monotheism, you said that pagans can actually be mono, the word mono thing. Do they get looked upon differently than the pagans that actually believe in the multiple gods?
Sadly, as I was saying, because that was something that a lot of pagans actually tried to use back in the day, back in the 4th and 5th century, they tried to be like, hey, you know, we might not believe in your God and your Jesus Christ and your Bible, but we do believe in only one God who created the entire universe and everything within it. So we're very similar. Is that okay? And the answer was still no. They were not seen as any different than any of the other pagans because their God was wrong and it was a false God. So they're just as wrong as somebody who believes in 7,000 false gods.
No, I'm talking about like in the actual pagan world itself with other pagans.
Oh, cool. So yes, and we are going to actually get there now. So it's a great starting point because yes, it's actually something that really kind of breaks my heart that even though pagans have not only been murdered, there's genocide, everybody, even still to this day, you can't, like, we talk about how we're in the broom closet because you can't even tell your parents that you're pagan, and it's like 2022. And so like all of that has happened to us, continues to happen to us, and still different groups of pagans within the pagan community are still ridiculed, and monotheistic pagans are one of them. And that was a great question because yes, everybody hates the monotheistic pagans because they compare them to Christianity and to Catholicism and all that and say that you're just a Christian witch, you're just a Christian pagan, when really that is the farthest thing from the truth, because there are many monotheistic spiritualities that have existed forever and that are very pagan and very indigenous. And so that's so awful that we continue to outcast each other within our own community. The same thing happens to Wiccans. Everybody hates the Wiccans. Everybody loves to rip the Wiccans apart and tell them that, because
Why is that?
because since Wicca was created in the 1940s by a dude, they are, these pagans that think that the only way to be pagan is if you practice an ancient spirituality, one that predates Christianity. And Wicca is like, a dude created it in the 40s and it didn't get popular until like the 50s. So people consider that to be new agey and not traditional and not real, which is silly and dumb. It's so dumb. We should not be judging each other. It's so ridiculous.
I think, in all honesty, that the reason why people do it, though, is just like they do every other thing that they have going on in the world, is because they want to be the superior people. That's what it boils down to. In all religions, no matter what it is, no matter what type of religion you are, your religion is going to be better than the next person's just because you feel it's better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's caused so many problems now with the different pagan groups or the different, Christian groups or the different Catholicism groups. We're not seeing that we're all human. We're seeing that, oh, well, you're different because you worship this god or this goddess, or you're different because you practice this way and do this and you do this ritual. at the end of the day, we're all still human. We still bleed the same color when we cut ourselves. You know, and that's the problem now. And it's never going to change because our society has gotten to that point where we can't see past our own asses.
I agree.
Sorry.
No, I completely agree. And yes, I love what Infinium said as well. Exactly. And it makes it so difficult to join these online communities, which is one thing that I love about our academy. We really are. Like, I know Infinium, you were thinking about joining the academy and enrolling, and something that just happened, which I love. We have such a cute community. I never see anybody on there being like, oh, you do it wrong because you're wicked. Like, nobody says those kinds of things. We're all really supportive and lovey, and it's so cute. But yeah, exactly. Number one, if you are trying to connect to these beautiful spiritualities that are outside of the colonizing religions, who are trying to connect with spiritualities that have absolutely nothing to do with the Bible or with Christianity or with Catholicism or Muslim religions or Judaism, and you're trying to get as far away from that as possible, and you reach out to awesome communities that are pagan, that you think you have found the communities that are going to help you explore these spiritualities, and really a lot of times you just end up with judgment and hierarchy, and that's very annoying. And of course, judgment and hierarchy has existed since the dawning of time, and it's not going to be different no matter what community you're in. But I do think that as pagans, we should definitely stop trying to decide whose pagan is better, because it's ridiculous. I think that instead of trying to decide whose pagan is better, we should be focused on learning and gaining knowledge and working on ourselves, working on not culturally appropriating, working on not being racist, working on not being horrible and being ethnocentric and being homophobic, and work on, because that's honestly what paganism was also about, especially back in the beginning, or back in the 4th and 5th century too, is Christianity brought a lot of judgment. It brought a lot of judgment against women. It brought a lot of judgment against gay people, whereas we know pagans were all hella gay. And they had all kinds of fun rituals where they were all super awesome and super gay and had orgies, and they didn't, sex was not seen as bad, and neither you could wear, your body and the human body wasn't seen as bad, and you were allowed to, dress however you wanted, have sex with whoever you wanted, learn and become educated no matter what gender you were. They were considered to have like 60 or 70 different genders. And so instead of focusing on whose pagan is better, instead we could adapt some of these values that ancient pagans had and work on ourselves to decolonize and de-Christianify ourselves, which would be by being anti-sexist, anti-racist, anti-homophobic, anti-transphobic, and all of those things, because that's what paganism really was before Christianity.
And having respect for each other and their own beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because as I said here too, that paganism isn't a religion. It never was a religion. These people did not see themselves as people who have religion and my religion's right and your religion is wrong. It was just they all had spirituality, and it was like, well, I have a way that I hope I can use to help the crops grow, and if it works, cool, and then we'll keep doing it. And like, they had beautiful rituals that were all about flowers and helping plants grow and worshiping water and learning from water and learning from the moon and worshiping the stars and understanding the universe. And yes, of course, pagans were not like these saints who never fought each other. Of course they did. We're human. That's all we do. But they didn't have this hierarchy of religion. And so we shouldn't create hierarchy of religion in the pagan community when that's a Christian thing to do. And that's not what we want to do, and not something that pagans did before persecution and colonization.
Do you think ultimately, Alex, so that eventually, even if it's not in our lifetime, do you think that we will ever get to that point where that word pagan will ever not be used as something as in a negative fashion?
Yes, I do. And I actually think that even though there's a lot of judgment going on about the new aged movement of religion and how like so many people are Wiccan and pagan now, and that it's a little annoying, you know, and we have like witch talk and witchcraft all over Pinterest, and now you can go to Pinterest and discover how to do a cord cutting spell, and you can go to YouTube and there's 7,000 different videos about how to water scry, and even though a lot of these things might be made up, they might be silly, they might not have any base or root in ancient practices, I think that this is a sign that the stigmatism or the wow, stigmatism is not the right, anyway, the stigma, the the social stigma surrounding this religion is starting to go away, especially in the Western world. I know that obviously if we talk about other countries all over the world, either A, you have places like northern and western Africa, where Yoruba, one of the pagan traditions over there, never left. Never. Yoruba has continued and lived through the colonialism and never left. It's Yoruba is what inspired Santeria, what inspired voodoo, what inspired hoodoo in the southern US. And so in Africa, paganism never went away, ever. And throughout East Asia, paganism never went away either. Once the birth of Taoism, and Buddhism was born, it was never, Christianity did come in and try, but they were never able to actually make all the Buddhists go away. But I do think that in the Western world, we are seeing it slowly come back. I don't think pagan will be this bad derogatory word by the time I am like 60. I have a feeling.
Well, see, I guess I think my concern is you know, because I'm looking at all these YouTube things and all this other stuff, the TikToky which stuff that we've talked about on, you know, the chat groups and stuff. And it's interesting to me how a lot of them, like we've discussed before, don't go into detail about how to do these things. And unless you actually learn from somebody who's actually experienced how to do the spells, how to do all that stuff, it's more of like, I don't want to say a show, but it's like a niche. Oh, let's do this to piss off mom and dad today. I'm gonna become a pagan. You know, that's what I'm concerned about is going to happen to, and then that in turn would end up taking that word as a pagan and turning it into a negative fashion.
Yes, I agree. And I have definitely been, I see both sides very, very well. As somebody who grew up pagan, and it was very strict, where I had to learn all of the ancient techniques from mentors, from the specific language that they were used in, 2,000 years ago. And like, I didn't have the option, nor would it be seen as okay in my family to like go look something up on YouTube and pretend that that was a legitimate practice that I was allowed to then like use. That wasn't okay. And so of course a little part of me is like, oh my God, witch talk, and they're ruining the pagan community and they're going to give us a bad name. But when I stop that frame of mind and I stop trying to gatekeep what it really means, what witch talk and Pinterest witchiness means, and all of this big rise of these new age spiritualities, what I hope it means at least, is that it's in its baby phase. And in the baby phase, you just have everybody getting into it without understanding it. And then this is usually how things work. Then over time, once it becomes popular enough, then outlets are created for education. And then accessibility becomes better. And once accessibility becomes better, education becomes better, then people can learn the right way to do these things, and the way that respects the culture that they're from, the way that respects the culture that started all of these pagan spiritualities, and doing it in a way that is respectful and kind and beautiful. But that only can come with accessibility and knowledge and education. So right now it's in its baby phase. Well, yeah, we're definitely already, next week we have a class on modern paganism, because next week is our class on Wicca. And during our Wicca class, we are going to, of course, talk about all of the fun modern branches of paganism, where they came from. We're going to focus on Gerald Gardner, who he is, and Aleister Crowley, and who he is. And it's going to be so fun. So yes, but I still think we're probably going to end about 15 minutes late. But yeah, I'll try to not go too late, Andrea. So this was, oops, nope, wrong page. And please feel free, everybody, to totally just like take yourself off mute and ask questions or scream comments. I don't care if you interrupt me. It's totally cool. Or to put them in the chat. And please go read the chat. A lot of really amazing things have been said. So, contemporary paganism. So we've learned about the 4th and 5th century Europe. We've learned about how the 4th and 5th century Europe and the Christian religions affected the entire world after that. Because as you know, or as I hope that most of you know, after that, after everything that I just said throughout this class, after that fucking asshole saint of a douchebag said that the only way that you were a citizen was if you were Christian, that had a domino effect.
And who was that?
Oh, this guy. Augustine?
Oh, okay, Augustine. Okay.
Yep. Saint Augustine, he put in his book, The City of God. He was a very respected dude. Obviously, he became a saint. And he put into his book that you were not a citizen if you were not Christian. And that anybody who is not Christian or Jewish, anybody who is not Christian or Jewish is not a citizen, and therefore does not have to be treated with any of the rights of that country, which in this case it was the Roman Empire, or the Visigoth Empire, which means that you can be imprisoned forever, you can be tortured, you can be murdered, and you can be deported. And once he said that, it caused a domino effect across the entire world, where, as you know, Europe, then this went to the Celtic traditions throughout the UK, where you had the Druids, you had the Celtic spiritualities that are very beautiful, very well documented, which is a lot of what pagans, modern pagans tend to follow, is a lot of Celtic and Druid beliefs. And this happened there as well. You were not a citizen of the UK. You were not a citizen of England. You were not a citizen of Ireland, if you were not Christian. And of course, this took a very long time. But then, of course, as time went on, all of Europe became, you were persecuted if they called you pagan. And every country slowly had different words for it. The overarching definition was, of course, absolutely any spirituality that was not Abrahamic, that was not Christian or Jewish, during that time. And then later we have Islam and Catholicism that join in on that party. But
Question.
Mm-hmm.
With the Ireland, if they're not citizens if they're considered pagan, then could that be where the term driving the snakes out of Ireland came from? By, of course, they're driving the pagans out, but that would make a lot of sense because they weren't considered citizens, so they were beneath you, but beneath, so to speak, like prey like a snake, right?
Exactly. That's so happy you brought that up. Yes. So Saint Patrick, his name wasn't actually Patrick. It was, I forgot what his name was, but he had a completely different name. And his disciples, there are a lot of theories around this. During that time period, we're not sure if it was Saint Patrick himself, or people claiming to be religious missionaries. But yes, religious missionaries during the time period of Saint Patrick went to Ireland, and they rid Ireland of the snakes, which meant that anybody who wasn't pagan or anybody who wasn't Christian or Catholic by that time, anybody who wasn't Christian, Catholic, or Jewish wasn't a citizen. And so he, or a lot of the missionaries, went and threw all of the pagans off of cliffs, drowned them in the ocean. There's actually a very famous cliff in Ireland that they threw all the pagans off of and drove them out either by murder, torture, or they ran and escaped. And yes, that is what we celebrate when we celebrate St. Patrick's Day, the day that a group of missionaries murdered all of the pagans in Ireland.
Groovy.
Yeah. Yeah. So
One funny thing, because I live right by St. Augustine in Florida, and ironically enough, that is a place where a lot of gypsies and pagans practice.
that's awesome.
So
That is so
kind of
cool.
last laugh, the haha about all of it.
That's awesome. I do want to, please don't think I'm calling you out. Love you so much. Totally. Just want to mention really quick, it's Romani, not gypsy. Gypsy is a derogatory term. We should use Romani instead of gypsy. Just to let you know.
God, I never knew that.
Yes, just to let you know. It's no problem though, but yeah, just to let you know, so now you know for the future.
So celebrating St. Patrick's Day is like a horrible thing now.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah.
You know what? Growing up in the city of Chicago, it's like the biggest thing in the world here. We have like parades all over the place, and it's like this time to get drunk. But holy cow, that's not good.
No,
Well, you know, I've heard it as to where the St. Patrick's Day celebrations in the United States are celebrating all the Irish immigrants who made it out of those accursed lands, so to speak. But that was just, I guess, my Irish grandmother's perception, so that she could still be a part of the celebration without, not honoring her people.
yes, and same with a lot of holidays, just as the one we all just celebrated in the US a few days ago. We are trying now in modern times, and when I say modern times, I mean within the last 100 years. So within the last 100 years, we are slowly trying to take these traditions that were in fact started by the celebration of something really horrible, such as Thanksgiving being the celebration of the genocide and murder of the indigenous people of this country, and St. Patrick's Day being a celebration of ridding Ireland of the pagans. And it slowly evolved into, yes, the celebration of Irish immigrants, the celebration of the people who escaped persecution and tyranny. Or when it comes to Thanksgiving, the celebration of indigenous people and the indigenous people that are still here today. And so, yes, over time, these things evolve and change, and it's beautiful. And we're trying, which is good. Some people are trying, which is good.
Alex, I just want to confirm that the era of the pagan persecutions, was it the 5th century?
It started technically in the 4th century, but it was just persecution by talking down to them. The persecution of pagans, as in murder and genocide,
Yeah.
yes, it would be the 5th century. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. So yeah, this spread to the rest of Europe slowly, and as well as the rest of the world. As we know, in North America, manifest destiny and the murder of all the indigenous people. And a lot of people thought that it was perfectly fine to murder all of the indigenous people of North America, or a lot of them, to murder a lot of the indigenous people in North America because they were pagan. Therefore, it's totally okay to kill them, and therefore they're not citizens of their own country because they're not Christian.
As they left to escape religious persecution.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So, there was also other reasons. Of course, we're not going to go through the entire history of the colonization of North America, but one of the reasons was they were pagan. Therefore, God thinks it's okay. We can kill them all. So, yeah. But moving on to much later. Now, Christians, Catholics, Judaism, and Islam have colonized most of the world, and become the dominant religion throughout most of the world, with East Asia holding on a little bit to Buddhism. So then you have this resurgence in the 19th century, where people, it actually started happening in the very late 18th century, where people started, becoming very interested in it. During the Renaissance period, obviously, it was still not okay, and you still had the chance of getting murdered. But because artwork and poetry and dance and theater and all these things started to become so prominent throughout Europe and also throughout the Middle East, and throughout many parts of the world, you start to see paganism kind of make a small resurgence because people are interested in the anthropology, in the art, in the poetry, in the reading. And as we know from pagan cultures in the Middle East, because people who lived in Arabic countries and practiced Arabic polytheism really enjoyed writing everything down. So there were tons and tons of records of their pagan beliefs because they really liked writing things down. The Strega witches in Italy also really enjoyed writing things down. And then you start to see this resurgence too, where things like tarot and make a reappearance. If you take my tarot class, we have a whole history of tarot, but we're not going to go over that. But it started to make a resurgence, and so did a lot of divination work. And you start to see people really being interested in how this might change fashion and kind of getting into non-Christian fashion, and getting into a lot of the cultural aspects that would have been involved in paganism, getting involved in learning about homosexuality. Obviously, they didn't have to learn about it. They were already just homosexual. But learning that in these ancient spiritual practices, it was okay and loved and cherished. And so, of course, people who are gay and who are part of the LGBTQIA community want to practice a religion in which homosexuality is valued and treasured and loved and encouraged. And where all of these things are more accepted. And anyway, you have this beautiful resurgence that starts happening towards the end of the 18th century. And yes, people were persecuted for it, people were murdered for it, but it continues to happen anyway. So then we get to the 19th century, and we start to get philosophers and cultists who love paganism and are very anti-Christian. You start to get people like Aleister Crowley, or the people before Aleister Crowley who taught Aleister Crowley. You start to get the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. If you don't know what that is, we have a class on that. That's a whole thing. But the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, big, gigantic, incredible, amazing esoteric cult. Also awful in many ways, but also really cool. But it's an esoteric cult. And then all these other esoteric cults start to spring up. And then suddenly Europe becomes interested in the pagan cultures that exist in Africa and in Egypt, which is in Africa, but like you get North Africa, West Africa, South Africa, and they start getting really interested in the pagan spiritualities that existed there. So what do? They go travel to North Africa and go steal all of their pagan relics, take them home and culturally appropriate them and use them and claim them as their own. They start ripping open tombs and looking at the spells and witchcraft that was used during mummification and stealing all of it, and thinking that they can use those spells to become rich and to become famous and all of these things. And then some people, instead of using it for cultural appropriation, end up writing books about it. So we started looking at the witchcraft in Egypt, and we start looking at the witchcraft throughout South and Central America. And instead of just ripping open tombs and destroying everything and trying to use it to get rich, people start writing books about it. So then the whole world can learn about it. And you see this gigantic resurgence of all of these ancient pagan spiritualities and cultures that people were probably practicing the entire time in secrecy. But now Europe knows about it. So it becomes very famous and popular. And then, of course, you get Gerald Gardner. Can anybody tell me in this room, who knows who Gerald Gardner is?
I kind of do.
Awesome.
Same.
Tell me.
Well, he was the person responsible for creating Wicca.
Yes. Very good.
Was that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, yeah, that was my husband. But yes, Shane, you were right.
I learned.
Yep. Yes. And so then we have this creation of this religion called Wicca. And there are amazing, beautiful, awesome things about Wicca and all the different branches of Wicca. You have fairy Wicca, you have Gardnerian Wicca, you have Norse Wicca, you have all these a million different types of Wicca. Gerald Gardner is known for Gardnerian Wicca, hence his last name. But now, there are wonderful, incredible things about Wicca that, number one, it started to catch on, and it held all of these pagan values that were beautiful, such as not being homophobic, and such as not being transphobic, and such as not holding these weird, strange, awful values that the Christian church had about hating certain groups of people. And they were much less racist too. They were much less racist. They were not anti-racist, but they were much less racist than the Christian church. And you also start getting real information. So Gerald Gardner was an extremely intelligent person who did his research, who studied these ancient cultures, and who actually knew what he was talking about. So you're not getting fake information from people who just ripped apart a bunch of Egyptian tombs or, traveled to Syria once and learned about cartomancy. You are getting real information about ancient spiritual practices. And you are getting an anthropological look at these different practices and learning about them in a way that is educational and real, and learning to respect the cultures that they came from. But I guess some of the downsides of Wicca are going to be that it is this Mod Podge. It is a Mod Podge of Druid and Celtic and Norse and Egyptian and Arabian and Persian and African and South American. They're just kind of mixing them all together to create something new. And some people,
It's like polytheistic view.
yeah, it is definitely like a new form of polytheism, because instead of just having a bunch of Celtic gods, instead of having like 600 Celtic gods, you have 500,000 gods from all over the world. Which I kind of think is kind of cool. I know that it does cause some problems, you know, where if you are going to mix together Celtic and African, or Celtic and Ugandan, Celtic and Ethiopian, Celtic and Egyptian, I mean, there's a lot of problematic stuff that's going to happen there, because a lot of, let's say, witchcraft that was created in Uganda was specifically created in order to protect themselves against the people coming from England to enslave them. And so you are mixing cultures that like specifically created witchcraft and spirituality to harm each other or to protect themselves from each other, which has some, you know, there's some problems there. You are also taking from practices, and you don't really know if they're a closed practice. You don't really know if it's okay to mix them with other practices, or if the people of those cultures would be okay with you just kind of only taking one part. Like you take one little part from Aztec, one little part from Mayan, one little part from Celtic. Would it be okay with those cultures for you to only take a tiny part of their spirituality and say that the rest is just nonsense? You know, would that be okay? There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of stuff. But Wicca is a growing, evolving, changing spirituality. And of course, when things first start and they're in their baby phase, there are some problems. But it's growing and changing and evolving and fixing a lot of those problems and changing a lot of those problems, which is awesome. So let's talk a little bit about modern paganism and modern witchcraft. Number one, I would love to hear what all of you identify as. What spirituality do you identify with, if any? And what are some of your practices? And what do you think of this new resurgence of pagan practices?
So I obviously practice Wicca, but I do not identify as Wiccan because I do not believe that I have to have that. There is a component to being Wiccan that you have to have a strict religion in there. And that's not what I identify with. But a lot of my practices do take from Wicca, and I typically gear myself towards the Egyptian gods and goddesses, and that's my main focus. But I do have respect for all other deities and cultures, and I think, you know, that I'm just really excited that it's really taking off and people are being awakened into the spirituality more nowadays. So
me too. That's awesome. Thank you for telling us about your culture and practice. I love that. And Egyptian practices are so cool. And most of them are very open practices as well. So it's actually a really, really amazing ancient culture that if we learn about it and we practice the witchcraft from it, it was all meant to be shared with the rest of the world. It was meant to be something that the Egyptian people wanted to share. So I think that's beautiful. Who else?
I'll go.
Awesome.
I'm polytheistic and consider myself pagan. I started out learning about non-Abrahamic religions by this Wicca book I got as a gift. Well, Wicca itself, I like the premise of, but there's just some things that didn't feel like me, so I branched out and learned about all these different ones of it. And finally just realized that it, not a single one relates well enough to me, so I take a bit of, I don't know how to say this, but I take a little bit of everything that is appropriate and just do my own thing. Like, I'm very drawn to Slavic mythology and their religions. I worship Marana, the winter goddess in Slavic mythology, but I also believe in Lady Chang'e from Chinese mythology, the moon goddess. I research them to make sure that those two aren't closed practices, that they are just
Yep. Those are
figures.
open practices. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I've like I say, I've been a Christian for 50 years, and it's still my personal belief in Jesus and God himself. But I had taken an interest in, it's called the Wiccan Church of Canada. I took some classes there, and I was able to get dedicated by the third degree high priestess who founded the Wiccan Church of Canada. So this was quite exciting for me. And
Wow,
I've been taking a number of courses like through the academy here, as well as another group that offers classes too. So I've been very busy learning, and I also have celebration on the full moon and the new moon, and in which I light a candle at each time, and I have a new moon or a full moon tea and an anointing oil I put on myself, and also some incense I burn. So this is a time when I get to celebrate.
Awesome. That is so cool. Thank you for sharing that with us, Andrea.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm a little different here, obviously. I do practice shamanism, which obviously is a closed belief system in some of the situational ways that I actually believe. But since joining the academy, I've learned that I'm becoming more eclectic as far as my beliefs go, and learning about all the different pagan cultures and taking something from each of them. But I still do kind of gravitate towards the shamanism as far as like my meditation and my astral projection and things like that, of that nature. But I do worship Venus, and I do worship, the Great Spirit in my eyes. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Thank you.
It's so wonderful that we can hear from so many people with so many different belief systems.
I was gonna go next. I identify myself as an eclectic pagan spiritualist with roots in Native American and Celtic naturalism, because these are part of my heritage. But I also am a non-denominational, what's the word? I was gonna say priest, but that's not it. I have certifications for non-denominational pastorage, so to speak. So I also do spiritual counseling for a variety of different pagans. But I also identify as a lunar kitchen witch. And in the past year, I felt like I've been called by the goddesses of the night sky. They are Selene, Estrella, and Hecate. Hecate. Some people pronounce it that way. But they're more, I've learned recently that they're more Roman. So I don't know how that's gonna shape and mold my belief, because it doesn't really, not all the practices are similar, but some of them are. So
That is so cool. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's awesome. And awesome. I love what Tammy said as well. Oh, and that's another one that I forgot to mention. So I know I mentioned that Buddhism is pagan. It always has been pagan. It's always been labeled as pagan. But Hinduism is also pagan as well. Remember that paganism is just any religion that doesn't follow, that doesn't fall under Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, or Islam, or any of the branches. So Hindu and Buddhism are also both pagan. So I started out as an Arabian polytheist, since my parents are from Syria and Lebanon, and that's what they practice. And slowly grew up and practiced a lot of their rituals and stuff with them. But of course, in the United States, that wasn't really something that most of the pagan groups were practicing. Actually, none of them. I couldn't find, and still to this day, have never found a pagan group that practices Arabian polytheism, or even Arabic polytheism. So I kind of had to switch it up, because I didn't just want to practice with my parents forever. So I ended up joining animism, or joining this group that was led by this amazing woman called Rena Shesso. She's a very popular artist, or author, sorry. She's a very popular author. She ran this animism group, and I thought it was so cool. So I joined and became an animist, and I loved animism. It was beautiful. And she's actually a professor at this academy. She teaches a lot of our animism classes. She's wonderful. And moved on from that into fairy Wicca and Gardnerian Wicca. Got initiated into a coven, did the whole thing, became a 3rd degree Wiccan in a Gardnerian coven, which is really, really, really structured, by the way. If you've ever like been a real Wiccan, like who has to like, go up in the degrees and stuff, you have to like, it's pretty crazy. It is very, very structured and organized. I didn't actually end up really liking it, but that's where I met the other professor at our academy named Shentat. And when I went through my time as a teenager practicing fairy Wicca, Shentat is a fairy Wiccan, and he was amazing. He taught me everything that I know now. He was, now I went away from Wicca. I decided that that wasn't really the path that I follow, and I call myself now an atheistic Arabic polytheist, which is actually really funny, because a lot of people are like, how can you be atheist and polytheistic all at the same time? Because my culture is based in Arabic polytheism, and I consider it part of my culture. It's how I grew up. It's where my parents are from. And so it's still part of my culture. But as I studied a lot of pagan spiritualities, and like I said, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I'm only 29. So, and I've learned every divination that there is to learn. I have learned and studied all of the Middle Eastern pagan cultures. I have studied 70 different pagan spiritualities from Uganda and like different countries throughout Africa. I have studied Mayan traditions and Inca traditions and Druid traditions and Celtic traditions and Irish traditions and all of us, so many. And what I am really realizing is that I don't know if I actually think or believe that deities actually exist in the way that they're portrayed. I believe in the energy of the universe. I just got my master's degree in clinical neuroscience, and I believe in the electric pulses that exist throughout the universe and the things we cannot explain. I love the jinn and the fae, but I don't know if I actually believe that there's a deity out there that created anything that exists on this planet, or a deity that interferes with human life, or a different dimension that consists of only deities, or deities that come and talk to you or interact with you in any way. I don't know. So I call myself atheistic for that reason. But I am still kind of trying to find my path. And so I opened up an academy for free so that everybody can come learn together and we can all find our paths together. So that's me. I have seen, Andrea, yeah, that there are a lot of pagans that started out Christian. I'm noticing that in the academy. I feel like every time I tell people that I know nothing about Christianity at all, nothing. I know the history when it pertains to how they killed the pagans. That's about it. And that nobody in my entire family is Christian or Muslim or Catholic or Jewish. I didn't realize how rare that was. Oh, thanks, Bree. You're so sweet. So, would anybody, number one, like to continue sharing because I want to hear about everybody's spirituality. I feel like a big thing in this class is learning about how paganism evolved and the term paganism evolved. So please continue to share your spiritualities. But also, now that we're pretty much coming to the end of our What is Paganism class, I think I want to do another one that's kind of part 2, where we'll go into the 18th century and Aleister Crowley and Gerald Gardner, talk a lot more about that, and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and like Hellenistic paganism, Hellenistic witchcraft. But our class next week is on Wicca. So we're definitely going to go through that in that class a lot. We're going to learn about Wicca and the history of that, which will, of course, include Aleister Crowley, because Aleister Crowley was a mentor of Gerald Gardner.
You said next week, Alex? I thought it was on the 10th.
Oh, is it on the 10th? It might be on the 10th. Is it on the 10th?
For the Wicca class is on the 10th.
Oh, thank you. Cool. Then it's not next week. It's the week after. Awesome. So our class on Wicca is going to be not next week, but the week after, and we'll go over a lot of that stuff. And then we also have a class on what is witchcraft, where we will go over all that stuff and how is witchcraft different from Wicca and different from paganism. Which, spoiler, witchcraft has no religious denomination. But yeah, please continue to share your spiritualities. And also, do you have any questions? Me too, Tammy. That's awesome. I definitely think
When are you doing the witchcraft one?
the witchcraft one is on the schedule. Here, let me look. Where's my phone? Let me tell
Maybe
you.
I'm looking at it the wrong one then. The Wicca class that's on the 10th is at 6. Is that the witchcraft one, or is that the second class to this one?
The witchcraft one should be separate, unless maybe it's only in my drafts and I didn't put it on the calendar yet, which could be a thing. Let me check. Let me look. Okay, so we have Kundalini Reiki. Okay, we have what is Wicca, December 10th. No, you're right. Oh, okay, I haven't put it on the schedule yet. I'm sorry I confused you. The week after that one, after what is Wicca, I am going to introduce what is witchcraft, and that'll be the next week. So we're going to learn what is
Okay.
Paganism, what is Wicca, and what is witchcraft.
Okay, so we haven't got another done. Okay, we gotta
Yeah.
keep my calendar straight.
Oh, that's cool, Bree. See, I'm waiting for something like that to happen to me. I think that might be why I lean towards atheism a little bit, because a lot of people think that since I'm atheist, that means I don't know. I do spells all day long. I communicate with the fae and the jinn, and I practice witchcraft all day. It's one of my, I love witchcraft, and I am a tarot reader. I'm a palm reader. I'm a runes reader. All of the things, and that's not what atheism means. Just means I don't believe in a deity. And I think one of the reasons why that might be is because I've never had these experiences that people talk about where they see or meet or feel the presence of a deity. I've never had that. I've never had a meditation where a deity comes to me. I have never felt the presence of an overarching spirit, or a deity of any kind. I have never had that experience. I would love to have that experience. I remember the first time I experienced going to the world of the fae and traveling and seeing fairies. That was incredible and amazing. And I guess that is kind of like having an experience with a deity, but I consider a deity to be a lot more than that.
Well, fae are more considered as more of a energy, not really a deity, at least for my
Exactly.
belief systems.
Yep,
But
exactly.
yeah, this only happened like a year ago. I was out meditating in the dark in the middle of like the woods on a full moon, and suddenly this name popped into my head, and I was like, I've never heard this anywhere before. And so I was like, but I don't know, it was just ringing in my head. So I started doing my research, and then I started getting drawn more into predominantly the Roman goddesses of the night sky. So it just kind of spiraled out. But I'm almost 40. I'm 34, and about to be 35. And you know, I've never experienced anything like that either. I really didn't believe in any of the goddesses before that.
Awesome. That is such a cool experience. How amazing. I would love to have something like that.
What I found for myself, because I believe in God, I say my prayers every night for myself and for my friends and my family. And then when I go lay down, if I'm tired and I have something pressing on my mind, I lay down and I totally relaxed. And God talks to me with an answer.
That is so cool. Do you mind, if you feel uncomfortable, please tell me. Totally cool. But I have never actually talked or asked a lot of questions to anyone who still believes in the Christian God. What made you realize or think in your mind that it was the Christian God and like not Hecate or Demeter or Persephone or, you know,
I have a very close contact with God, and like I say, I pray and I talk to him throughout my day sometimes, and it's just that I get answers to my situations and I follow them through and they come out right as I'm just resting. So my mind says, be still and know that I am God. So basically I'm stilling myself and God talks to me.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that for me.
You're welcome.
I did have, oh, go ahead.
So
No,
I was actually wondering, because you said that you actually did like the fae magic and stuff in Shintai. When he talks about like the divine, the goddess and stuff, is that what you're talking about? You've never experienced that? Or is it just like an actual goddess or God coming to you and saying, hey, here I am, Alex, come see me type deal?
Any of the above. Yep.
So where like he experiences all that, you know?
Yeah.
And
To me, it sounds like it's like whatever resonates with your soul. Like, if when I was a kid growing up in church, you know, I never had that connection, but my cousins would be like, you know, you just know someone is listening, someone is responding to the energy that your soul is putting out. And what you decide to label it is what you feel is, you know, the correct entity for you.
Definitely. I agree. Yeah, Professor Shentat, being my mentor for so many years since I was like 13. If you guys ever take any of his classes, he talks about God herself, which is not a deity. I had to learn that from Shentat. You have to take a lot of his classes to realize he's not actually talking about a deity. He's talking about the energy centers of the universe. God herself is just energy that interacts with you and interacts with the universe all at the same time. It is atoms that are connected to each other through the time-space continuum and through quantum physics. And that when you do certain actions, there are certain reactions within the universe. And he calls that God herself, which I didn't actually know that. I thought he was talking about a deity for like 4 years. Turns out he wasn't. But he also talks about how he just like, and I know a lot of people have this experience, where he just, deities like Ra and Tut and Set, which are all Egyptian gods, and gods like Hecate and Demeter, just like come over to his house for dinner. like for real. Like they
Yeah,
try.
because he follows the Egyptian gods and goddesses, doesn't he?
Yep, he follows the Egyptian gods and goddesses, but he believes that all the others exist too. He just follows the traditions, sayings, meanings, and values of the Egyptian gods, but he thinks all the others exist too. He just doesn't follow their shit. But like, he believes that all the Norse gods exist, all the Celtic gods exist, all the gods exist. You just, some of them you follow their values and others you don't. And that they'll come bother him while he's trying to sleep, and he'll tell stories about how they come over for dinner and he has picnics with them and he can talk to them and interact with them like they are, like, it reminds me of like if I was talking about like a ghost or something.
He's awesome though. That's why I think he's just
Yeah.
straight up awesome.
He's so awesome. And so that would be super cool. I've heard a lot of people have that, which would be amazing. I'd probably be super scared at first if that happened, but still super amazing.
You know what though? I mean, for me, you know, I hear the spirits and certain situations. I can't go into certain areas just because it's like all of that overwhelming noise is in my head all the time when they're talking. And so I completely understand, and it's hard. Like when I went to the cemetery the other day, I had to literally encase myself in this huge like bubble just to not be with all the spirits and all the voices. So I completely understand that.
That is so awesome. I mean, also sounds extremely overwhelming.
It is very overwhelming. It gets to be very tight. And putting up that protection around myself, because you know I had my son with me, putting up that protection around myself and around him in the whole entire process, it drained the crap out of me for that night. I was completely down the rest of the night from it, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's just because I'm still learning how to do that protection, learning how to do that ability to, as Danielle tells me, just tell them to go away type deal, but it's not always that easy.
Yeah. Wow. That is so.
Yeah, with me, I haven't really seen a deity or felt a deity or heard anything from a deity, but I do feel energy like constantly. Like when things happen, I will feel energy going down my my power arm, my power hand, into my power hand, and like tingles and stuff, like when I'm doing certain things, like when I'm playing with my, you know, not playing, but working with my tarot cards, you know, I'll just ask a question or something and I'll just get that tingle going down. It's like, it's weird. I feel the energies, but I just don't know where it's coming from. Obviously, probably the universe, but you know.
That sounds very much like what I feel. Exactly. I definitely can feel change and shift in energy, especially working with travel. One of my favorite forms of magic is astral projection. And so yeah, definitely. I feel you. That's awesome. And I also love, by the way, what's hold on, where was it?
Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. What Infinium said about God herself, well, Shentat's description of God herself, was beautiful, and I can't find it in the chat now. Aha, yeah. So Infinium said, I know what woman he is talking about. I equate this ambient field goddess as the universe essence, the greatest of mothers, and we are all extensions of her, that we are this essence wearing a lens for a while, which I love. I love that. Thank you for typing that. And I think you would love Shentat very much, because it sounds exactly like him when he's talking about it, but I always have to confirm with him that this is not a deity. It is an essence of energy that connects all things and all atoms and all molecules. And that's why when you create sigils in his class, you can pass them through these energy centers to basically have the entire universe affected by the sigil that you created, which is a very cool concept, and I love it.
It's an amazing class.
It
It's not only eye-opening to somebody who has not experienced magic before, but it's an eye-opening experience just as far as the knowledge you get from a person that is in my eyes, he's brilliant. He really is. And I was concerned about it, you know, like I said at first when he starts talking about things, but as you listen to him, it's just like all of that energy he has about the gifts he has brings it out and helps you engulf in the knowledge he's giving you even more.
I agree.
So I definitely suggest taking the class. I really do.
So
Oh, and then another thing is, you know, because I do Reiki also, you know, so when I draw from the universe and I get that energy and I can literally feel that energy in my hands. And like my husband, like he gets a bum knee, so I help him with that. And he says that it's crazy how he can feel that energy coming off my hands, going into his knee and making it feel better. So, I mean, right there, that tells you that you can access that universal energy.
definitely. Okay, so there was one more thing I wanted to show you guys. Obviously, we're not going to go through this whole slideshow. I made 2 slideshows. One of them was ancient paganism, which we already went through, from the 4th century, which is a very long time ago, and how the term was made. This second slideshow will be on the website. This will be part 2 when we come back to this class. Feel free to go to the website and look over it, though. So not only, and something that I really wanted to share with you guys, because this reminded me of what we're talking about now. So number 1, this is going to talk about what contemporary paganism is, how it differs from Wicca. So please feel free to read all of that once it is on the website. Actually, you know what I'd do? Hang on, 1 second. I don't think I can actually, yes, I can. So that all of you have it right now, before it even goes on the website, I will put it in the chat. So you guys can just have this, look over it tonight if you feel like it. But one thing I did want to show you, that shows over what's Gardnerian Wicca. The psychic senses. So from what you guys were describing, somebody even said, I forgot who it was, but they can feel the earth vibrating, which is your amazing connection to earth energy. And also, the clair senses. So that you guys can put a word to the things that you have been feeling, which kind of helps me, even though obviously it doesn't change anything, but now you can put a word to it. So you can read through what, what clairvoyance means. Just, clear. Oh, go ahead.
Is there sort of like 5 or 6 clairs?
Yep, exactly. So then you have clairaudience, you have clairsentience, clairsent, clairagency, or sorry, clairtangency, which is clairtouching. That's not one I work with a lot. As you can tell, completely forgot what it was called. But that's that a lot of people do work with, especially with Reiki. Reiki has never been one of my divinations, so, but that is amazing. And then you have clairgustance. I love clairgustance. Anybody who is a kitchen witch, clairgustance. And then you have clairempathy. Yeah.
Can you be all of them at once, or is that
Yes.
something like
Oh, yeah.
not possible?
Oh no, you can definitely be all of them at once. Most people feel like they identify with one or two a lot more strongly than any of the others. But oh yeah, you can have all of them all at once, all at the same time. But that might help give you a name for the things that you're feeling. As a lot of you have brought up, you don't really know how to explain the things that you're going through. And this can help to give that a name, and also help use that name so you can reach out in the community to see if anybody else has these same feelings and experiences as you do.
Is there a word then you would associate for somebody who actually has like all the symptoms? I don't want to call them symptoms because that sounds like you have a problem. Like all the senses.
Usually I just honestly, which for me, I'm sure there are many, many words for it, but I would just call those people psychic, and then name all of the ways in which they are psychic. So you are psychic in a clairvoyant way, in a clairgustance way, in a clairempathy way. And if you are just psychic in all of those ways, then you can just list all of them. So here, I will let you read, since somebody asked about clairempathy, the definition of clairempathy.
I went to a spirit fest type of thing, and there was a medical, oh my god, what, I can't remember what he called himself. He was like
Medical intuitive?
yeah, something like that. And he literally, could feel like that, what kind of illness somebody had, and then I went up there and he like guided me through doing somebody else, not doing, but you know what I mean, somebody else in the room. And I just closed my eyes. I looked at her and then I closed my eyes and I just kind of felt like I was off balance and like knee pain. And she had all those. She was having balance problems and her right knee was hurting her. And I was like, holy crap. Holy crap. I get blown away every time.
You need to go there next time for yourself.
Yeah, seriously.
Give readings.
Yep.
Wow.
I feel like I'm lucky. I haven't tried it since, but
I was in a mall a few years back, and in front of me, going out of the store, was a small lady, and the vibes I got off of her was incredible. Like to me, it's like she is going to die soon. it was just incredible. It was so overwhelming. I had to go for a walk.
Wow. That's amazing. And that would be really scary too. I've definitely had a point in which I have felt every single one of these, but I would definitely not say that it's something that I can do on cue. There are a few of them that I can do on cue, because of the type of divinations that I practice. I am able to feel someone's energy very, very quickly and very fast. I can tell just by looking at you, just by touching, or like having you touch an item and then I will touch that item. I can tell if you're scared, if you're sad, if you're upset, if you're happy. And I can describe the things that you're going through in life very quickly without you having to tell me anything at all. And I have experienced all of these before, but I definitely, like clairscent, I wouldn't be able to do on cue. I have only been able to do that during astral projection. Clairgustance, I have never been able to do on cue. It's just happened before. Yeah, so I would say that I wouldn't classify myself as being able to do them because they just happen randomly.
I definitely could say I could probably do some of these. The smelling, I smell honey all the time when I hear my best friend's grandmother talking to me because she smells like honey. My grandmother smells like lilacs. So I know when they're in the room and stuff and things like that. As far as like the empathy being my sign, it's just, it comes naturally for me. So I can't really say I can taste without putting anything on that. I don't do that one other than when I'm doing the kitchen work and stuff, I guess. So I don't know. I think it's kind of awkward for me because I can say I've experienced all of them. But definitely being able to feel the energy from that person and being able to sense when something's going on, knowing that they've had some sort of issues or understanding that they're going through some issues just by their energies and stuff. I could definitely do that, no problem. And hearing the voices and like I said, all that kind of stuff is something that just kind of happened. It's happened ever since I was little and never really understood why.
Wow. I love how all of us just experience energy and the universe and our different psychic abilities in such different ways. It's so cool to hear about people's experiences with each one of these. And this is going to be part of our Wicca class as well. So you kind of get a little that's so funny. I love when people I think that was Tammy. Yeah. So now remember that we were talking about when it comes to clairgustance, and I think you might just be extremely clairgustant, by the way, which is why you don't understand. Because we're also talking about not smelling it. So this is not where like, oh, I can smell casserole and I know what it's going to taste like. Like, yeah, that's, your nose is supposed to do that. But we are talking about being able to, like, let's say you, macaroni and cheese. Can you sit here right now and taste macaroni and cheese right now, just on a whim? Are you able to force your mouth and your sense of taste to taste macaroni and cheese right now in this moment on cue?
I can't do that because I have problems with my nose always congested.
Can you elaborate more on that, Alex?
No, I am actually tasting metal right now. because I told you about the metal spoons and forks and silverware. That's what I'm talking about.
Then you are
Absolutely.
probably you're probably Claire Gustin. If you can just say silverware,
Yeah. Oh,
like,
yeah.
start
Taste that.
tasting like metal
Yeah.
just by
Yes.
saying silverware. Yep, you are Claire Gustin, and that's probably
I
why
thought
you don't.
that was normal.
Nope, that is not.
I
That's
thought everybody did that.
nope.
Okay.
It's not normal though, Alex, you saying?
Is what normal?
It's not normal to be that
Yeah,
way?
it's not normal to be that way.
Oh no. If someone brings up aluminum foil, I have a really hard time with that. Like, I don't like anyone talking about tasting or biting aluminum foil because I have a really hard time letting go of that.
That would burn.
Yeah. So you are very Claire Gustin. That's so cool. I bet that sucks. I mean, I bet that that's very hard to deal with because that's a very intense sensation to be able to say something and then taste it.
Oh no, I have a really good sense of smell too, and I've had people ask me like, how did you smell that? Like we were so far away from that, and I was like, no, I know that smell anywhere.
Yep. And then clear smelling, it's going to be now remember that when we talk about these things, they cannot be anywhere in the air. Now, if you are just absolutely amazing at sniffing things out, that is its own talent all in
Yeah.
itself, and that's amazing. But that's not a psychic ability. Whereas if I was to say, like, if I was to say lilacs or roses to you, and your nose right now instantly can start smelling a rose just because I said that to you, or just because you started thinking about roses, and now your nose is literally starting to smell roses, that would be clear smelling or clear scent.
Okay,
Yeah.
that does not happen to me. What
See.
does happen is the smell of like perfume, flowers, cigars, and cigarettes. But usually it follows with something else.
Yeah.
See,
I
like
have a
when you
very
said
good sense.
lilacs, I can smell the lilacs. So.
Yeah. When you say
Yeah.
lilacs, you can smell. Yeah, you're. Aw.
It's just
What's clear
like
scent?
I reminisce of that smell with my grandmother. You know, we talked about that once before, and I think in a different class, where it's like when you're doing the spell work and you're wanting to make sure that you're actually not just creating a generic spell, you know, to be selling on the street corners. You're actually doing it. It might actually have been Danielle that we were talking about with, where you're actually incorporating talking to that person and getting to know that person and getting to understand what they want this for and how they need this to be used and why they need this to be used, and understanding that it's just that connection that they have with that person. And I think that's the reason why I can do it with like lilacs and like the smell of honey and smells of certain, you know, colognes or certain cigarettes and stuff, because I remember those indications of people in my life that have made those impacts, whether they're positive or negative fashion, and those smells automatically come to my head.
That is so cool. Wow. So yeah, you have clear scent.
Lovely.
Wow. Yeah.
Alex, could you tell me again what tonight's class was named so I can put it to my mentor?
Of course. What is paganism?
Okay, that's easy though. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Is there a way that if you have or you think you might have one of these clairs to kind of practice or train yourself with it to get better at controlling it?
Yes. And we have tons of classes for that. One of them that I would suggest right now, even if you're not in the academy already, you can just go to our YouTube or just enroll in the academy, but our psychic sensitivity classes. We have mindfulness and psychic sensitivity classes where basically all of these psychic abilities, our professor Danielle goes through each one and helps you to be able to get better and better and better and practice with them, and gives you tools for building your psychic abilities and tuning your psychic abilities. So yes.
And that's
Okay.
where I learned all this stuff from, and they're very good. And we practice and we practice. And she walks us through like tips and stuff like that. So they're really good classes to watch. And that's where I found out I have like a few of these that I didn't realize, and I got freaked out. But anyway.
Yeah, Becca and I took the class together.
That is awesome. Here, let me give, for anybody who doesn't already have this. Yep. Oh yes, I am going to right now. I'm going to post all the links for people. So here is the link to our YouTube. Go to the playlist section, and right here, the playlist Mindfulness and Psychic Sensitivity Training. There are 11 classes in there so far where you will learn how to train your psychic ability. So here is the link to the YouTube. And let me move this bar. Here is the link to the website. It's on Celtic Fae Mythology right now, but here, I'll put it on the homepage. So if you go to the homepage and then you're going to click on study guides, that is going to be where all of the information and notes and presentations and slideshows and worksheets and everything from every single class that we've ever done will be. Sometimes I'm slow, so like after this class, this slideshow will be up tonight, but sometimes it takes a couple days. So here's
Do you
the
have crystals up at all?
Yep. So
Okay.
yeah, we have, where's circle casting? I feel like crystals should be in C, but maybe I put it under something else. Ah, stones. So under stones and crystals, right here, we have crystal gem therapy. We have quick notes, crystals, and we have so many, all of the things. We have so much in the crystal section. So yeah, you can check out the crystal section. There's a link to the website. And then the Facebook page, here is a link to the Facebook page. If you would like to enroll in the Academy, remember it's a completely free. Send us a message. Send a message to this page. Just click the message button right here. Say, hey, I'd like to enroll. I will be the one answering you. I am the only one that answers messages and enrolls people, just so that I know that every single person who got enrolled went through the same orientation process, so that I know that what information they had when first entering the Academy, and I can make sure I give them all of the information, which does mean that you might have to wait a few days or a week for a response, but you can just keep coming to classes and doing everything, even if you're not enrolled yet. But yeah, I get so many messages. It does take me a while. Sometimes it's a lot to go through. So this is a lot. And that's us on our foraging adventure. That's our herbalism professor, Dorian. He's cool.
And you said the PowerPoint from the first part of this is actually on the website, right?
It will be. I'm not sure yet if Tonya put it up yet. I put it in the admin chat and asked Tonya to put it up. So hopefully she does it tonight. I think she said she was going to do it tonight.
Okay.
And then this slideshow will be up as well. And this slideshow, oh my gosh, come on. Why? Okay. This slideshow, if you want to get a head start on what Gardnerian Wicca is, and on what Wicca is in general, what modern paganism is, all of those things. This entire slideshow is on modern paganism and Wicca and witchcraft. So, and then of course the psychic senses. And the discussion questions at the end of this one are what we are going to be talking about, just like today after class. Our discussion questions were, what is your spirituality? How do you practice? These are the discussion questions for our Wicca class. So yeah, you guys got a little head start.
Thank you, Alex. It was a great class.
Of course. And yeah, if
Mhm.
you guys don't have any more questions or comments, then that is the end of our class for today.